Jessica Langford was 68 years old, a quiet woman with soft eyes and silver hair that curled around her face. She had lived alone for years after her husband, Thomas, passed away. They had shared a small but cozy home filled with books, plants, and laughter. After his death, the house felt too big, too empty, and too quiet. Her only son, David, had promised to visit often, but life and work kept him busy. He lived with his wife, Rachel, in the house Jessica had helped them buy. Jessica had used her savings to pay most of the down payment, saying, "It's your turn now. Build your own life." For years, she lived peacefully, calling David every Sunday. He'd answer quickly, always saying, "Mom, we'll come soon." But weeks would turn into months, and soon Jessica stopped asking. One winter, Jessica caught a bad cough that wouldn't go away. The cold air made it worse, and soon, she could barely walk without losing her breath. The doctor said it was a serious chest infection, and she needed care and regular medicine. She tried to manage on her own, but her hands trembled, and the stairs felt endless. When David found out, he visited with Rachel. "Mom, you shouldn't live here alone," he said, looking around at the quiet house. Rachel stood behind him, holding her phone and scrolling. "It's not safe for her," she added, her tone flat. Jessica smiled softly. "I don't want to be a burden." David shook his head. "You're not. Come stay with us until you get better." Rachel smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Jessica. We'll take care of you." Jessica believed her. A week later, she packed her small suitcase, took her medicine, and moved into their house. The first few days felt nice. Rachel made soup, fluffed the pillows, and even helped Jessica settle into the guest room. She told neighbors, "We're so glad to have Mom here." But once the neighbors left, her voice changed. Jessica noticed it first during dinner. Rachel frowned when Jessica coughed. "Maybe you should eat in your room," she said softly, "so you can rest." The next day, Rachel complained about the noise of Jessica's breathing machine. "It's hard to sleep with that sound," she whispered to David when she thought Jessica couldn't hear. Jessica heard every word. David stayed quiet. He would hug his mother in the morning, but say nothing about the things his wife said. Jessica didn't want to cause trouble, so she smiled, thanked Rachel for the meals, and stayed in her room. Days turned into weeks. Jessica's strength began to fade, but she took her medicine carefully. She was thankful for the small things: the sunlight through the window, the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen, the memory of her husband's laugh. But one evening, things changed. Jessica heard Rachel on the phone, whispering sharply. "Yes, the medicine is expensive," she said. "And we're the ones paying for everything while she just sits there." Jessica's heart sank. She looked down at her thin hands and felt a deep ache, not in her chest, but in her heart. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. The next morning, when she reached for her medicine, the cabinet was locked. She asked Rachel gently, "Did you move my pills?" Rachel looked straight at her. "I locked them," she said. "You've been taking too many. We can't afford to keep buying more." Jessica blinked. "But the doctor said." Rachel cut her off. "We can't keep doing this. You're too expensive to keep alive." The words hit Jessica like ice water. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. David walked into the room just then. Jessica turned to him, her voice shaking. "David, she locked my medicine." Rachel looked at him calmly. "I did it for her safety. You know how confused she gets with her pills." David hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the floor and said quietly, "Maybe Rachel's right, Mom. We'll sort it out later." Jessica watched him walk away. The son she had loved, raised, and sacrificed for couldn't even look her in the eye. That night, Jessica lay awake staring at the ceiling. The machine beside her clicked softly, the air faintly humming. She thought about her husband, Thomas, how he always told her, "Never let people take away your dignity, Jess. Even if it hurts." She turned her head toward the window. The moonlight fell across her pillow, pale and cold. Rachel's laughter echoed from the living room. Jessica closed her eyes. Her heart felt heavy, but somewhere inside, a small spark lit up, the quiet strength that had carried her through every storm of her life. She whispered to herself, "You took my medicine, but you can't take my mind." Jessica didn't cry that night. She didn't beg. She simply decided that this would be the last time anyone made her feel helpless. She didn't know how yet, but she knew one thing for sure. The next chapter of her life would not be written by Rachel or David. It would be written by her. And for the first time in weeks, Jessica slept with a calm heart. Not because things were better, but because she had finally decided they would be. Morning sunlight touched the curtains, but Jessica didn't feel its warmth. Her head hurt, and her breathing was slow. She sat up slowly, feeling the coldness of the room. Rachel had opened a window during the night, saying, "Fresh air will help you sleep." But the cold had only made Jessica's chest tighter. She reached for the cabinet beside her bed. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal handle, but it didn't move. The small lock glinted under the light. It was still locked. Jessica sighed softly. She knew asking again wouldn't help. Rachel's words from the day before echoed in her head. "You're too expensive to keep alive." It was a cruel sentence, but Jessica refused to let it break her spirit. She had faced pain before, losing her husband, working extra hours to raise David, and spending lonely nights in an empty house. This was another kind of pain, but she told herself she would survive it too. She dressed slowly and walked to the kitchen, using the wall for support. Rachel stood there making coffee, scrolling on her phone. The smell filled the air, but not the warmth that usually came with it. "Good morning," Jessica said gently. Rachel didn't look up. "Morning." Her tone was sharp, short, and tired. Jessica looked at the counter. Her medicine box was sitting right there, beside the sink. "Rachel, I need my medicine, dear. My chest hurts." Rachel put down the coffee cup and crossed her arms. "We talked about this, Jessica. The doctor said to take it once a day. You've been taking it too often. We can't afford to keep buying them." Jessica's heart ached. "I haven't taken more than what he said. I'm careful." Rachel's lips curved into a fake smile. "You always say that, but you forget things. It's better this way." Jessica looked into her eyes and saw something cold. Not care, not worry, just irritation. She turned away silently, afraid that if she spoke, she might cry. David came into the kitchen, buttoning his shirt. "Morning, Mom," he said softly, then glanced at Rachel. "Everything okay?" Rachel gave him a sweet smile. "Of course. Your mom's just being a little dramatic about her pills again." Jessica wanted to tell him the truth, to beg him to see what was happening, but she looked at her son's tired face. He already looked torn between his wife and his mother. She didn't want to make him choose. So she just nodded. "I'm fine, David." David kissed her forehead and hurried out the door. The sound of his car leaving filled the quiet house. Jessica sat at the small dining table, her hands folded. Rachel poured herself another cup of coffee and turned on the TV. A cheerful voice announced a new recipe show. The sound felt almost cruel. Jessica tried to eat a piece of toast, but her throat was too tight. Her body was weak, but her mind was clear. She thought of Thomas again, how he always told her to stay calm, to think before acting. That afternoon, Jessica stayed in her room, looking through an old photo album. She smiled faintly at the pictures of young David, his school plays, his first bicycle, his graduation day. "He used to hug me so tightly," she thought. Where did that warmth go? The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Rachel entered the room, holding a basket of laundry. "You're making a mess with those books and papers," she said, glancing around. "I'll clean it later." Jessica smiled politely. "I'll put them away soon." Rachel looked at her with a strange expression. "You know, Jessica," she said, setting the basket down, "life gets expensive. Medicine, food, bills. Sometimes we have to make hard choices." Jessica met her gaze quietly. "I made many hard choices too," she said softly. "Like giving up my own comfort so you and David could live in this house." Rachel's smile faded. "You shouldn't bring that up. It's our home now." Jessica looked down at her hands. "Yes, your home." Rachel turned and walked out without another word. The air in the room felt heavier than before. That evening, Jessica heard laughter from the living room. Rachel's friends had come over. They were talking loudly, clinking glasses, watching something funny on TV. Jessica stayed in her room, listening. Her stomach hurt from hunger, but she didn't want to go out there. Later, she heard the sound of footsteps and laughter fading as Rachel said goodbye to her guests. Then silence. Jessica finally got up and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The medicine box was still on the counter, locked tightly. She stared at it for a long moment. The key hung from Rachel's keychain, which she had left on the table. Jessica's hand trembled as she reached for it, but she stopped herself. No, she wouldn't sneak or steal. That wasn't who she was. She went back to her room, her chest heavy, and sat by the window. The moon was bright that night, shining through the curtains. She whispered softly to herself, "Patience, Jessica. There's always a way. You just have to find it." For the next few days, things got worse. Rachel became colder. She stopped bringing food to Jessica's room, saying, You should come and get it yourself if you want to eat." David came home late, tired and distracted, and barely noticed what was happening. Jessica's body grew weaker, but her spirit grew sharper. She started watching quietly, noticing things, remembering where Rachel kept her keys, where the papers were, how Rachel spoke to David. She didn't know yet what she would do, but she knew this much: she wouldn't live this way forever. As she lay in bed that night, her breathing rough, Jessica made a silent promise to herself. "You may think I'm helpless," she whispered, "but I've survived worse. You'll see who I really am." The moonlight touched her face, and in that still moment, her eyes didn't show pain anymore. They showed quiet determination. The woman who once depended on others was gone. Something stronger was waking inside her. Something that would soon change everything. Days passed slowly inside the house, each one feeling heavier than the last. Jessica's body was weak, but her mind had never been sharper. She spent her mornings sitting near the window, pretending to rest, while her eyes quietly followed everything that happened around her. She saw how Rachel checked her phone all day, how David avoided eye contact, and how they whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Jessica had stopped asking for her medicine. The pain in her chest had become a dull companion, something she carried without complaint. But behind her calm eyes, a storm was quietly building. One afternoon, while Rachel was out shopping, Jessica noticed her phone ringing on the kitchen table. The caller ID flashed David. She didn't touch it, but she heard the voicemail beep and then his voice. "Hey, honey, don't forget to pick up that necklace you wanted. We'll use Mom's card for it, right? She won't notice." Jessica's heart sank. My card. She remembered giving David access to her small savings years ago, just in case of emergencies. Now her own money was being used for their luxuries. She walked slowly to her room and sat on the bed. The old photo album still lay open from the night before. She ran her fingers across her late husband's picture. "Thomas," she whispered, "I think it's time I listened to your advice again." She reached under her pillow and pulled out a small wooden box, the one Thomas had given her 20 years ago. Inside was a silver key and a small folded note. The note read, "In case of emergency, go to Mr. Allen." Mr. Allen had been Thomas's lawyer and a family friend. Jessica hadn't spoken to him in years, but she remembered his kindness and how he helped with their will. She smiled faintly. "You always thought ahead, didn't you, Thomas?" The next morning, Jessica asked Rachel if she could visit the doctor. Rachel frowned. "You don't need to go anywhere. Just rest." But Jessica smiled gently. "It's only a checkup. Please, Rachel. I won't take long." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Fine. I'll have the driver drop you off." As soon as the car left the driveway, Jessica told the driver to take her to Mr. Allen's office instead. The man looked surprised but nodded. Jessica sat back, her hands shaking slightly. For the first time in weeks, she felt free. When she arrived, Mr. Allen's assistant guided her in. Mr. Allen, now older with graying hair and kind eyes, stood up immediately. "Jessica Langford. My goodness, it's been years. How are you?" Jessica smiled weakly. "Not too well, Mr. Allen. But I'm here for a reason." She explained everything. How Rachel had locked her medicine, how they used her money, how they treated her like a burden. Mr. Allen listened quietly, his hands folded. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "I'm so sorry, Jessica," he said gently. "You don't deserve this. But you still have full legal control of your assets. You never transferred ownership of the house or the savings accounts. Everything is still in your name." Jessica blinked. "Everything?" He nodded. "Everything. You were wise not to sign those documents David brought years ago. I remember warning you." A small tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness, it was relief. For the first time, she realized that all the power she needed had been with her all along. Mr. Allen leaned forward. "If you want, I can help you make sure they never hurt you again. Quietly, legally, and permanently." Jessica smiled softly. "Yes, Mr. Allen. That's exactly what I want." They spent the next hour preparing papers. She transferred the ownership of the house to a charity fund she and Thomas had once dreamed of creating. A small foundation for widows who had no one to care for them. She also withdrew money from her hidden investments to buy a small lakeside apartment under her own name. When everything was done, she signed the last paper and said, "I want them to find out the way they made me feel, shocked and powerless." Mr. Allen nodded. "They will." As she left the office, the air outside felt lighter. The sun touched her face, and she closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she wasn't scared. She wasn't helpless. She was finally taking her life back. That evening, when she returned home, Rachel was in the living room with her friends again. "Oh, Jessica," she said with a fake smile. "Did the doctor give you more pills?" Jessica smiled politely. "No, dear. I don't think I'll need them anymore." Rachel laughed. "That's good. You're finally learning." Jessica said nothing. She went straight to her room, sat by the window, and looked at the stars. She whispered, "Thomas, I did what you'd have done." The next few days passed quietly. Jessica acted normal, calm, polite, almost invisible. Rachel thought her silence meant defeat. She didn't know that each quiet smile Jessica gave was a step closer to freedom. One morning, a large envelope arrived at the door. Rachel tossed it on the table, not bothering to check the name. Jessica saw it, but didn't say a word. It was addressed to Mrs. Jessica Langford. That night, Jessica packed her suitcase. She didn't take much, only her clothes, her husband's picture, and the old wooden box. She looked around the room one last time, the walls that had held so many silent tears. Before she left, she placed a single letter on her pillow. It said, "Thank you for showing me what my kindness was worth. I'll make sure you never have to spend another dollar on me again." The next morning, Rachel found the letter but didn't understand what it meant. She shrugged, assuming Jessica had gone for another checkup. But by evening, the real surprise came. A man in a suit stood at the door holding a legal notice. "Mrs. Langford?" he asked. Rachel nodded. He handed her the papers. "You have 30 days to vacate this property. Ownership has been transferred." Rachel froze. "Transferred? To who?" The man replied, "To the Langford Widow Support Trust, founded by Mrs. Jessica Langford." Rachel's hands trembled. The papers slipped from her fingers. Upstairs, the medicine cabinet stood open, empty. And far away, beside a calm lake, Jessica sat on her balcony, sipping tea as the evening breeze touched her face. She smiled, not with bitterness, but with peace. She had finally taken back her life, quietly, completely, and with grace. The morning sun touched the Langford house gently, but for Rachel, the day began with a noise she didn't expect, the sound of a car door closing outside. She walked toward the window and saw a man in a suit carrying papers. Thinking it was a delivery, she opened the door with her usual fake smile. "Mrs. Langford?" he asked. "Yes," she said, brushing her hair back. He handed her a large brown envelope. "Official notice, ma'am. The property has been transferred. You and your husband have 30 days to vacate." Rachel blinked, confused. "Transferred? There must be a mistake. This house belongs to us." The man checked his folder. "Not anymore. The documents were signed and verified yesterday by Mrs. Jessica Langford." Rachel froze. "Jessica? What are you talking about?" The man gave a polite nod and walked back to his car. The sound of the door closing echoed through the hallway. Rachel tore open the envelope and started reading. The words made her heart drop. "Ownership transfer, Langford Widow Support Trust, signed by Mrs. Jessica Langford." She ran to David, who was still getting ready for work. "David, read this. What is this supposed to mean?" David took the papers, his eyes widening as he scanned them. This can't be real." Rachel's voice rose. "She can't do this. She's your mother." David looked pale. "It says she already moved out. The papers are official. We don't own this house anymore." Rachel threw the papers on the floor. "After everything we did for her? After taking care of her?" David didn't answer. He knew the truth. They hadn't taken care of her. They had ignored her, used her money, and treated her like she didn't matter. And now it was clear Jessica had seen everything. That evening, the house felt different. The laughter, the comfort, the illusion of control, all gone. Rachel tried to call Jessica several times, but her phone was switched off. Meanwhile, miles away, Jessica sat on the balcony of her new apartment near the lake. The air smelled of pine trees and rain. The soft waves shimmered under the sunset. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and closed her eyes, feeling peace she hadn't felt in years. Her caretaker, a kind woman named Linda, brought her a cup of tea. "You're smiling again, Mrs. Langford," she said kindly. Jessica nodded. "Yes, I think I finally understand what freedom feels like." She sipped her tea slowly, watching the ripples move across the water. The pain she had carried, the betrayal, the loneliness, felt smaller now, almost distant. Later that evening, she heard a knock at the door. Linda opened it and called out, "There's someone here to see you." David stood in the doorway, his eyes tired and red. He looked older than before, his shoulders heavy with guilt. Jessica set down her cup and looked at him calmly. Hello, David. He hesitated before stepping closer. Mom, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know she was treating you that way. Jessica's voice was gentle but firm. You did know, David. You just didn't want to see it. He looked down. I'm sorry. Jessica sighed softly. Sorry doesn't change what's already been done. But I'm glad you came. He sat across from her, his hands shaking slightly. You sold the house? I didn't sell it, she corrected. I gave it to people who actually need a home, widows like me, who were left alone. Your father and I planned to do that one day. Now, I finally did. David looked stunned. So, you have nothing left with us? Jessica smiled gently. David, I gave you everything already, your education, your home, your start in life. But I can't give you my peace anymore. I had to take that back. He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. I understand. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of the wind. Jessica finally spoke. Do you know what hurts the most, David? It wasn't losing my money or my health. It was losing your voice. The boy who once stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. I hope you find that part of yourself again. David wiped his eyes. I will, Mom. Jessica reached over and held his hand gently. Then maybe this pain was worth something after all. They sat together quietly, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. There was no anger in her heart, only calmness. She didn't hate her son, and she didn't even hate Rachel. She simply understood them now, their greed, their fear, their weakness. When David finally left, Jessica stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the long road. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, Goodbye, my son. May you learn what love truly means. Over the next few weeks, Jessica began her new life. She volunteered at the local shelter, using her new trust fund to help women who had nowhere to go. Each face she helped reminded her of the woman she used to be, quiet, tired, and trapped. But now she was free. One afternoon, Linda handed her an envelope. It was from David. Inside was a short letter. Mom, I've left Rachel. I realized too late what I became. Thank you for teaching me the hardest lesson in the kindest way. Jessica smiled softly. She folded the letter and placed it next to her husband's photo. The sun was setting again, the lake glowing golden. She walked outside, letting the cool wind brush against her face. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel weak or forgotten. She felt strong, quietly, beautifully strong. She whispered to herself, You were right, Thomas. Dignity is worth more than anything. Jessica sat down with her tea, looking at the calm water, her reflection glowing in the golden light. And in that peaceful silence, she finally knew. The woman who was once treated as too expensive to keep alive had become priceless in her own way. She had lost a home but gained her soul back. And that was the best lesson she could ever teach.